Yo, class, fellow bone eaters, uh, good to see you. Rachel has also arrived. Um, so here, this is our Gompa Rapsel class. I don't have to, there's no one new here, so I have to tell, are you in the right class or not? So we're going to begin, as always, with some chanted prayers. And you want to go back? There we go. Sangye chodang soki chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chushe chunyen gipe sognam ki drola bencher sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, Arya Bodhisattvas. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, and that includes contemplating and meditating on the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho. Sashipuki Chukshin Meto Tramri Rab Lingji Nide Yen Padi Sange Shindu Mikte uargi trokunam dakshingla chupasho Jesu Lama Dampa Kenam Ki Chukukala Kenze Chuzinte Chitart Sampe Dulce Zinmala Sabke Chuki Charpa Abdu So Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, so we're going to now we're going to try to enhance that whatever motivation we develop by reciting the prayers, by remembering that, by calming our mind and trying to set particular motivation. So sit comfortably as always, relax your body, relax your mind. Place your alertness, first of all, on the breathing in front. And once you've recognized that, place your mindfulness on that. with your introspection, you want to make sure that you're holding that, being mindful of the respiration, for one thing, and mindful whether your mind is being a little bit rambunctious and what do you want to say, multitasking, thinking about something else, worried about the world, worried about other sentient beings. Leave those for the time being, even virtuous thoughts, and certainly negative thoughts. Divest your interest in them, divest your attention to them, and they begin to dry up temporarily. It's not a way to abandon them, obviously, from the root, but still they can be temporarily disempowered. To whatever degree you'll be able to calm your mind that way, now bring your attention to a more subtle object to calm the mind even more. That object being, first of all, the mental consciousness, which is a subtle, hidden object in a sense. We need some sort of logical reasoning to actually perceive it, such as its contents. We can see the contents as they are more gross than the mental consciousness itself. And once we've ascertained that, try to or perhaps remember the clear light nature of this consciousness. Again, hidden object. The fact that it does not offer any resistance to the appearance or reabsorption of material into the consciousness. That particular kind of lack of obstruction is also like uncompounded space. Is like that. It's a non-affirming negation. I think that because of this conventional clear light nature of the mind, I'll be able to become a better person. And I am now. All of my striving and virtuous actions will have a result in the future. The fact that I can observe this right now and feel some joy in knowing that I have this conventional clear light nature, this Buddha nature that is transformative. The reason I can observe that is because I'm a human being now, born while the teachings of Buddha still exist. I've encountered them and so forth. It's what the Buddha said is an auspicious moment, a life of leisure and endowment. If you've meditated separately on the great value of the life of leisure and endowment, you can actually feel joy when you turn your mind to the fact that we have it right now. Whatever, whether I'm close to death or whether I will live for decades, and what time I have remaining because of this Buddha nature that I have, I can develop good qualities that I've never had before, cement them, so to speak, by leaving a strong imprint in my mind of them, even if it's only at the intellectual level, if I haven't actually realized them intuitively. Renunciation, bodhicitta, the right view of emptiness. Why would we pursue those goals? To achieve our own liberation from cyclic existence, to put it to an end, recognizing we've been in cyclic existence from beginningless time and will continue to be in there, in here, as long as we have not realized emptiness directly. And as long as we haven't applied that antidote to develop the various realizations along the path to cease those delusions, the path of seeing, the path of meditation. But that's not enough, the Buddha advised. For those of sharp intellect, he advised not to follow just his lesser vehicle teachings alone, but to follow his Mahayana, the great vehicle that takes the great congregation of numberless mother sentient beings to the great destination of enlightenment. And by the way, brings our own enlightenment, even more profound than liberation from cyclic existence. All of this depends on recognizing sentient beings in an affectionate way, even those that are naughty or recalcitrant or downright evil right now. They are impermanent. They've all been our mother numberless times. And we will be with them in cyclic existence until we or they escape from it. I think in order to bring about their benefit, I have to achieve enlightenment, not just some random high realizations or clairvoyance. To do that, I need to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, which we have a little intuition of merit, creating virtuous karma and so forth, but we don't recognize the vast deeds of the bodhisattvas. And we don't really understand yet, although we're getting there, how to accumulate the collection of wisdom by meditating on emptiness correctly. To do that, we're going to listen, contemplate, and meditate on the teachings from Lama Tsongkhapa's great commentary, Gompa Rapsel, which is loosely translated illuminating the intent or illumination of the intent, a commentary on Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka, which itself is a meaning commentary of Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, which itself is a commentary to Lord Buddha's Prajnaparamita Sutras. I'm going to participate by listening, trying to understand the words, put them together, contemplating, seeing if it makes sense, weighing it in our mind, and then when some understanding arises, holding that for some time, even if it's just a couple of thought instants, leaving an imprint in the mind, to leave the imprint of the wisdom of meditation, wisdom of hearing, wisdom of contemplation, wisdom of meditation. I'm going to participate in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. Great, thank you. Good to see you all. Hi, Rachel. I just noticed you're here also. Does anyone, before we begin, anyone have any questions, lingering questions or observations? No? Nadine, you have something? You're fidgeting there.
Yes, thank you very much, George. I was thinking this concept of disintegratedness, Chikpa, is very important to explain how karma works, correct?
It's related with the Prasangika explanation of how karma, how once an action has been created, how it can have a result in the future, right? How karma works. So, yeah.
And I was wondering, Chandrakirti uses these external examples like seeds or cows and so on. Is it in order to show that disintegratedness pervades all phenomena, not only the internal ones, also external world?
I think those examples that we have talked about and will talk about again when we were talking about um, the cow or non-cow or whatever Gael or whatever, or ordinary beings and Arya beings, they're not so much talking about disintegratedness. They're talking about another topic that we're going to be, we'll try to clarify that a little bit. Okay, so we'll try to clarify that. Anyone else have a question? So I'll try to address that, Nadine, when we come to that. Stephen, you okay? Okay. So we are in a section in Thupten Jinpa's translation that he labels 12. It's not necessarily number 12 in the Madhyamaka or something. The merits of negation. And we've already covered this. So the first topic of that, the merits of refuting or negating arising from other. So we talked about that, a system that, as explained above, that means in our previous sections, a system that propounds or explains the absence of real entity, true existence, in the form of intrinsic existence, the absence of that, the emptiness of that, that system that explains that has the merit of not falling into the extremes of eternalism and nihilism, because it affirms dependent origination that is free of eternalism and annihilationism. So we talked about this last week, verse 633. Because the sprout is not other than the seed, it's not inherently different than the seed. Is that right? Because the sprout is no other than the seed, or not other than the seed. Is that true? Isn't the sprout other or different than the seed? Anyone? Nadine?
Is merely other, but not inherently other.
It's not inherently other, yeah. Um, we'll see in the commentary to that. So it says, because the sprout is not other or no other than the seed, there is no extinction of the seed at the time of the sprout. So if the sprout were inherently other than the seed, when the sprout came, because the sprout is supposed to be the result of the seed would have to um, have become extinct, right? It would have to be, how do they translate it here? Come on. Nyugu sabon shikpa me. There's no shikpa. There's no extinction or disintegratedness of the seed if the sprout and the seed were inherently other. And because the sprout and the seed are not identical, it cannot be said that the seed exists when the sprout is there. So it's somewhere in between. So this is kind of Madhyamaka view. So we talked about this before, just leading back to where we are now, just after another paragraph or two. If the sprout were intrinsically other than the seed, that's, as Nadine had pointed out, when it's in that verse where it says, because the sprout is not other than the seed, if the sprout were intrinsically or inherently other than the seed, the seed and the sprout could not be cause, and the seed could not be a cause and the sprout could not be its effect if they were inherently other, because there would be no relationship between them. The seed changing wouldn't bring about the sprout. In that event, in that case, the seed's continuum would certainly cease once the sprout exists. From one point of view, if it was inherently existent, I mean, we're talking hypothetically here. If it were inherently existent, it couldn't change at all. But on the other hand, if it were different than the seed, inherently different than the seed, if it were inherently different than the sprout, and because they are meant to be cause and effect, once the sprout appears, the seed would have to cease, right? Following? Don, are you following?
Yes, Venerable. They're inherently different, nothing would happen.
Well, yeah, there's two. You might say, well, I thought because if the seed were inherently existent, it couldn't change. How could it cease? Those are kind of like enigma. On one hand, if you look at it, if it were inherently existent, there are all these different contradictions. It couldn't change if it was inherently existent. Yet on the other hand, if it were the cause of the sprout, the seed was the cause of the sprout. Once the sprout came, the seed would have to cease. Okay, so those are two seemingly contradictory facts, or when I say facts, pseudo facts, like the facts that are presented in the political arena, the seed and the sprout would be totally unrelated. And so even if the sprout were present, this would not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed. This is the section, Nadine, that's talking about the example of the cow and the non-cow or whatever, and the ordinary beings and Arya beings. So even if the sprout were present, so you get the seed and the sprout, even if the sprout were present, this would not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed because they're inherently different. The lineage of the seed, the continuity of the seed, which we usually think of as being personified, so to speak, by the sprout. That's the sprout is kind of like the continuity of the seed. The seed is no longer there. There may be some, like I say before, some what do you call them, Sean? That when a seed opens up, there's sort of like some parts of it that fall off, like the outer skin or something like that. Does that have a name? And
The husk.
the husk, yeah, there might be the husk there. That's not considered the seed. You can't. If it were, you could take that husk and plant another plant, right? It won't germinate. The seed and the sprout would be totally unrelated. So even if the sprout were present, this would not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed. To illustrate that, the presence of a cow-like beast, which in the Tibetan, both in Thupten Chimpa's Tibetan script, Paul also has Bamin, but has been pointed out, someone, Mikhail and others have pointed out, Paul has pointed out sometime, this is, in some of the texts, this is translated as Bamen, which refers to a particular kind of sterile cow, right? Did I say it like that? The seed and the sprout, to illustrate, the presence of a cow-like beast in no way ensures the cessation of a cow's lineage after death. Likewise, the presence of ordinary beings in no way ensures Aryas do not sever the continuum of their own existence. Okay, we thrashed that around last class and in the discussion group, and we'll go back to it again, but let's continue. That's where we're going to start from there today. So the next paragraph begins, because there is no contradiction for the seed and the sprout to be cause and effect, even when the sprout is not intrinsically other than the seed, there is no extinction of the lineage of the seed at the time of the sprout. In this way, one avoids the extreme of annihilationism. So what is he talking about there? In that paragraph, or that sentence, let's say, or two sentences, there are some words that are highlighted. I don't know if you can tell it. Can you tell in that paragraph there's some words that are highlighted? What are the words that are highlighted?
From the root text.
You know, what are the particular words? What words are highlighted? Other than the seed, there is no extinction, right?
That is from the root text.
Of the seed at the time of the sprout, right? So those words that are highlighted are words that are found in the root text, as several of you are saying, and the commentary is phrased this way to sort of enlarge upon the root text to see the context of what it's talking about. There's no contradiction for the seed and the sprout to be cause and effect when the sprout is not intrinsically other than the seed. I'm not sure how even the word even helps in that. So if the seed and the sprout are not intrinsically other, if they're not intrinsically or inherently different from one another. They're just conventionally other. There's no contradiction for the seed and the sprout to be cause and effect. Because of that, there is no extinction of the lineage of the seed or the continuity of the seed at the time of the sprout. Because they're not intrinsically, not inherently different. So they're different. They're not inherently different. They're not inherently the same. There's some kind of intermediate kind of thing. So when the seed transforms and no longer exists as a seed, its continuity can exist. The example I gave of, let's say, wet clay being used by a potter to make a bowl, you know, what do you call it, turning a bowl, then putting it in the kiln, oven or whatever, and baking it. At the end, that clay pot, that baked pot or baked cup, whatever, that's different than the raw clay, right? It's not inherently different. It's the continuity of that wet clay that you had. So there is some continuity there, but the wet clay has disappeared. Okay, how are we doing? Making sense? This is a little bit tough section. Snehi, how are you doing? You've got your thinking glasses on. You're following? Okay.
But then you would also say that the clay and the pot made of the clay are not identical because the clay was malleable and now the pot is not.
Yeah, many things. They're not the same, but they're not inherently different. Okay, let's continue. It has on numerous occasions been explained that the seed comes to cease at the time of the sprout. It says on numerous occasions. So when it says cease, here the Tibetan word is gakpa, nyugu dusu, at the time of the sprout, sabon gakpa, len mangdu shepe. It's been explained many times that the seed ceases. So there's a cessation of the seed. You no longer say that the seed exists, but there can be a continuity of the seed nonetheless. So it's the same thing with karma. When an action has finished, the action has ceased. You've given the dana, you've squashed the bug in a negative way, whatever you've done, then that action has ceased, but it can still have a continuity in the future, we'll see. Okay. So it has been explained, it has on numerous occasions been explained that the seed comes to cease at the time of the sprout. The meaning of the seed's extinction, sabon shikpe-don, so the meaning of the shikpa of the seed, the disintegratedness of the seed or the extinction of the seed. Here, Jinpa translates in this context shikpa as extinction. The meaning of seed's extinction has been explained in the commentary as the termination of its continuity. That's what Jinpa says. Sabongi gyun chepa. Sabongi gyun chepa. Gyun chepa means, you could say how does Jinpa say here? Termination of the continuity. So he's taking chepa as termination and gyun as continuity. The FPNT translates I have to look here to see this, too small. Okay. Since it has been explained many times that at the time of the sprout, I'm reading the FPMT translation by Venerable John. At the time of the sprout, the seed has ceased. Right. And Jimpa also says cease. That's Gakpa usually means cessation. The commentary explains that the meaning of the state of disintegration, that's shikpa, the meaning of shikpa, of the seed, is that the continuity of the seed has been interrupted. Continuity of the seed has been interrupted. Jimpa says the termination of its continuity. So I think Venerable Jones' translation gives more meaning here. So when we talk about the shikpa of the seed has ceased, and that's gakpa. The seed no longer exists. And when we talk about the disintegration of the seed, the meaning of that is that the continuity of the seed has been interrupted, has been cut off. The continuity of the seed. In Drumpa's translation, he says its continuity, the termination of its continuity. I think you have to understand that means the seed's continuity. So that's what shikpa means. The continuity of the seed has been interrupted, and says that the non-disintegration of the seed is refuted. Or in Jimpa's translation, furthermore, the non-disintegration of the seed is rejected as well. Therefore, the phrase cessation of the seed's continuum here has to be understood in terms of the cessation of its lineage. Or as Venerable Jones says, because of that, the two in the seed, so therefore, saying the continuity of the seed has been interrupted is asserted to mean the continuity of its type has been interrupted. Or as Jimpa says, where Joan has translated the word type for Rikpa. Usually Rikpa means family or lineage. Jimpa translates it as lineage. Joan translates it as type. Okay. So are we making sense here? You getting the gist of this? Mikhail, what do you think?
Yes, I think so. There is some continuity between the seed and the sprout, but the type we call seed has definitely ceased.
Right. You could say the family of the seed has ceased, but there's some continuity of it that continues afterwards. The same way if you talk about karma, which we'll talk about in detail later when Chandrakirti explains karma from the Prasangika point of view. So Jimpa's translation says, so it cannot be said that the seed exists when the sprout is there. Hence, the extreme of eternalism is prevented as well. So because the seed type or seed family or seed lineage has ceased, you can't say that the seed exists at the time of the sprout. But you can't say, on the other hand, that there is nothing there at all. There's still some continuity of the seed. Okay. These statements convey the intent of the following lines from the Play in Full Sutra. Remember what the Play in Full Sutra is? Don, you don't remember? The Lailita Vistara? Do you have that?
No, I don't remember it.
Oops. So there are various translations. I think 84,000 has a translation. You don't have to but this is a very good translation from the Dharma translation group out in California that's been out for many years. So the Lailita Vistara. So in short, Stephen, what's the Lailita Vistara about? Stephen, are you with us?
I'm just looking at the summary, and it says it tells the story of how the Buddha manifested in this world and attained awakening
Right. So
from
the
the Mahayana perspective.
Lailita is kind of like the play, sort of like the play of the gurus or the play of the Nirmanakaya in the world is kind of like it's all done without conscious effort because it's a manifestation of the Buddha's mind. It's like the turning of a potter's wheel once it's been set in motion, that spontaneous kind of action in the world for the benefit of sentient beings. So the Lailita Vistara is the story of that particular, of Shakyamuni Buddha, starting when he was regent in Tushita heaven, taking rebirth in his future mother's womb, and taking the 7 steps and showing exceptionality as a child in all things, both secular and religious, taking wives, leaving the compound that his father had set for him. It essentially talks about the 12 deeds in detail, and his eventual achievement of enlightenment and so forth, and finally turning the wheel of Dharma and passing away. So that's what the Lailita Vistara is about. But it also talks about, it doesn't talk, while talking about that story of the Buddha, it also talks about profound points of the Dharma. So let me get this here. So in that, there is a statement, if the seed exists, the sprout would be the same. This is Jimba's translation. Or in Jones, if the seed exists, the sprout would accordingly. Jimba's translation, what is the seed, question mark? It is not the sprout. Or Joan, whatever is the seed, that itself is not the sprout. It is not something other, nor is it identical with it. Or Joan, it is not other than it is also not that. Thus, it is neither eternal nor annihilated. Such is their truth. Or Jones' translation, Venerable Jones. Therefore, reality is not permanence and is not annihilation. Okay, so leaving a little bit to be desired, there's a translation of this verse that Jeffrey Hopkins composed at one time. I don't know the particular text that he had this translation in. It's in Paul's manuscript. When a seed exists, just so does a sprout. Also, what the seed is not the sprout. It is not other than that, and it is not just that. Thus, a cause is a phenomenon neither annihilated nor permanent. So he has in brackets cause. So that's kind of like the sense here. This is talking about, let's say, a karmic cause, to go back to what we're going to be talking about in the future about karma. There we go. Thus, a cause, such let's say as a karmic cause, is a phenomenon neither annihilated nor permanent. So the cause is impermanent, karmic cause, or the seed and so forth, but it is not annihilated. It doesn't, in the sense that there's nothing existing afterwards. Okay, so now in the Bhasham, in Chandrakirti's Bhasham, he quotes this verse from the Lailita Vistara, and he gives his own commentary about it. So here Lama Tsongkhapa is paralleling that to try to understand that quotation a little bit better. The meaning of these lines is as follows. Were the seed to exist, the sprout which is caused by the seed would come into being in the same manner as the seed. When Jinpa says, were the seed to exist, that's kind of like leaves you a little bit. What do you think, Paul? Were the seed to exist? The seed exists, right? Were it to exist, is there any doubt that the seed exists? I'm not sure why he's translating there. The FPMT says the meaning of these lines is that when the seed becomes existent, also the sprout, that having the cause, which is the seed, arises accordingly. Okay, maybe that's what he means. Once the seed exists, the sprout, which is caused by the seed, would come into existence in the same way as the seed. Okay? Now, when the sprout comes into being, when it exists finally, say when it's still in the seed and the sprout is not arisen, you wouldn't say the sprout is existing yet, right? The sprout does not exist in the seed. So, but when the sprout does come into existence, come into being, it cannot do so from something other than the seed. It cannot come in existence from something which is inherently other than the seed, because they would be unrelated to one another. And so one might think that the seed and the sprout are identical in nature. The sutra quotation here states that although the sprout does not come into being from something different from the seed, it is not that the seed comes to transpose itself into the sprout. So if you're following along in the Tibetan, I think a couple of people are. So this is, when it says transpose, this is poa, popa, popa mino. What does popa mean usually? Do you know, Paul?
That's like to transfer or something like that.
Like when we call it transference of consciousness, powa. Here it's popa. I'm not sure the related words. So the FPMT translation says, therefore, if one thinks the two, the seed and the sprout, are actually one entity, although it is not the case that the sprout arises from other than the seed, from something other than the seed, it is not the case that the seed itself transfers to the sprout, or what does Jinpa say? Transposes itself into the sprout. Or transfers itself into the sprout, like poa, when we talk about transference of consciousness. Your consciousness is here in your heart chakra at the time of death, and through the practice of poa, you can transport that or transfer that to a pure realm, or if you have skill, you have to, if you're not skillful, don't be careful where you transpose it, transfer it. We following? Making sense? Yeah, Rachel.
Well, it just, hi, Venerable George. It just makes me think that what is actually the difference between transference of a consciousness? You're saying it just doesn't change at all in that transfer, right? But if we're talking about a seed, it changes into the sprout.
Yeah.
So that's not a transfer, even though some of that is continuing into the sprout. Is that the point of this?
It is saying that the seed does not come to transfer itself into the sprout. So there's not like this, the seed was there. Once the sprout is there, the seed is transferred into there. So they're together. It's not like that. The seed has disintegrated, but some essence of it continues. The same way with transference of consciousness, what happens in that case? Mikhail, do you know in transference of consciousness?
So I have no knowledge about that.
Okay.
Sorry.
So generally, you are meditating on the indestructible drop at your heart. You know what the indestructible drop is? Snehi, do you know what the indestructible drop is? Your volume must be down. You're unmuted, but we can't quite hear you.
I think that's the most subtle clear light mind and the most subtle body together.
No, so the indestructible drop is something encasing that. The indestructible drop is the remnant of the white bodhicitta and red bodhicitta that were the coming together of the sperm and ovum that your embryo, your former embryo evolved from. So that still exists at the heart, sort of like a seed.
So the casing is the red and white, remnants of the red and white?
Right. So that's sometimes visualized in Tantra as being white on the top, I guess, and red on the bottom. So that itself is called the indestructible drop because it's indestructible while you're alive, but it doesn't mean that that itself continues on. Within that itself, that indestructible drop is very, very small. But within that resides the subtlemost mind and subtlemost wind. So that is that combination, subtlemost mind and subtlemost wind, could be said to be indestructible because that will continue on to omniscience, until cyclic existence, while cyclic existence exists, helping sentient beings. So when you have transference of consciousness, when you try to perform that, if you've done it, all the different kinds of preparations with some physical yogas, depending on the kind of transference, sometimes it involves reciting a syllable, like what's the common syllable, Paul? Hic, is it, or?
I don't remember.
Okay, Mikhail.
It is hic.
Hic, sometimes different things. And visualization, you can cause that subtlemost mind and wind to leave the body and hopefully go out your crown aperture to the Pure Land or something. Okay, anyway, leave that.
Venerable George.
Yes.
Sorry, it's a bit of a digression, but now because you were explaining it, it made me realize I don't understand this.
Yeah.
So when we do the death dissolution and we do the, white increased, red appearance, black near attainment.
White appearance, red increase, black near attainment, right?
And then I thought it was clear light mind. But then what removes that casing? What opens up the indestructible drop?
So once the airs have entered into the central channel, let's say at the time of death, and not only entered into the central channel, because the central channel goes from has a length to it, but also that air within the central channel has absorbed to the heart chakra, to the indestructible drop there. Then that indestructible drop turns around, sort of, so that it was white on the top, white on the bottom, and red on the top, and they separate slowly. So one of the signs of death is seeing some liquid at the tongue, at the nose, at the nostril, or in the organ. I'm not sure in the female organ whether it's same if you've read, but in the male organ there would be some sort of white substance coming out that would indicate when those two signs are seen. That's sort of like a definitive explanation that the mind has left. The clear light mind has left. So when just before the clear light mind appears, that shell is opened a little bit, and that clear light mind then can reside there for some time in the heart chakra. But when it does leave, then the white and red remnants of the indestructible drop separate and come up to the nose and to the organ.
Thank you.
Does that help a little bit?
Very, thank you.
So, okay. So in Rinpoche's translation, he says, the sutra states that although the sprout does not come into being from something different from the seed, right? It comes into existence from the seed. It is not the case that the seed comes to transpose itself or transform itself or transfer itself into the sprout. It's not that the seed has ceased when the sprout is there. It's not as though the seed continues. Why? Because the sprout is neither intrinsically other from the seed, other than the seed, I would say, nor is it intrinsically or inherently identical with it in nature. So the sprout is not inherently one with the seed, is not inherently different than the seed. It is conventionally different than the seed. When both these possibilities are rejected, the true nature of the sprout is revealed to be a reality that is free from the extremes of eternalism and nihilism. Or as Venerable Jones says, whenever such two positions are refuted, the nature of the sprout is clarified or revealed, Jimba said, to be reality, which is free from impermanence and annihilation. Okay, so now we have another quote from the Lailita Vistara, which would be, and I'm not sure, I think we had, yeah, this is in chapter 13. If you look at the 84,000 organization translation of the Lailita Vistara, you can find both of these quotations. So they are, I think they're both in chapter 13, right? I didn't write down the whole, section that this comes in from the Lailita Vistara. So you have a chance to look at that. So now we have another quotation from the Lailita. The volitions are conditioned by ignorance. So sometimes, in other words, you could say the karmic formations are conditioned by ignorance, or ignorance is the condition for the arisal of karmic formations. In the 12 links, you have ignorance, karmic formations. What comes next? KT, what comes next after karmic formation? Consciousness, and then
name and form,
and so forth. So the 12 links. So here it's talking about the first two. The second one, volitions or karmic formations, are conditioned by ignorance. That means because of the condition of ignorance, karmic formations can come. It doesn't say that the ignorance causes the karmic formations. It says that because of the condition of that. Such volitions or such karmic formations do not exist in ultimate reality. This is the verse from Lailita Vistara. Both volition and ignorance, both karmic formations and ignorance, are empty, for they lack intrinsically real movement. So here we have the word movement. Jimpa's note here, I can't remember, was this important? No, this is just telling the place in the commentary where that comes. The volitions are, both volition and ignorance are empty, for they lack intrinsically real movement. Or in the FNT translation, the two, karmic formations and ignorance, are empty. That is, or in other words, they are free from inherently existent movement. Okay, so we need some commentary here, which Lama Tsongkhapa supplies from also, his interpretation of Chandrakirti's reply, Chandrakirti's explanation in Madhyamaka. So the first line presents the logical reason that volitions or karmic formations originate in dependence upon ignorance. You know the term Tendel. What does Tendel mean, Mikhail? Do you know?
Dependent arising.
Tendel, yeah, it could be, but literally Tendel means dependent relation, right? Del means relation, ten means dependent. So we can say tenjung would be dependent arising, literally, if you just wanted to take those. But they all mean the same thing. Tenjung, tendel, and longer combinations of them. So you're right. So the first line presents the logical reason that volitions originate or arise in dependence upon ignorance. So it's a dependent arising, independence upon ignorance. The second line, such volitions do not exist in ultimate reality. The second line presents the thesis, which is that volitions do not exist in ultimate reality. The third line presents how both the cause and effect are empty. They're empty of inherent existence, intrinsic existence. And the fourth line presents the manner in which they are empty. Movement here, and that's the word that's used, I think. What do we have? Yoa. So yoa, when we talk about our breathing meditation in the, before the class begins, and with still part of the class, meditation, we meditate on the air element. We try to, eventually we'll have a mental image of the air element. So the characteristic of the air element is what? Do you remember, anyone? Rachel, do you remember the?
Yeah, it's what allows motion.
So what is the characteristic? It was kind of like fire is that which is hot and burning.
Isn't it what? Sorry.
Air element is that which is
allows motion or moves.
Which is light and moving. Light meaning not heavy, right? So that's the same yoa here, that when we talk about the air element, that which is light and moving. So that can be referred to the air element, but here it says, let's see, how did Jim translate here? The third line presents how the cause and effect are empty. The fourth line presents the manner in which they are empty. Movement here refers to volition's activity of conditioning. And the lack of this indicates how volition is empty of volition. This too is stated with the proviso that, quote, they lack intrinsically real movement, indicating how what is being negated is to be qualified. This qualification has the same meaning as the phrase, do not exist in ultimate reality. Okay, that's could sound really complicated, right? Hi, Jeremy. You've just shown up. Are you in the right class? You've been here before, right?
Yes, sorry, Venerable George. I got the time wrong.
Oh, no problem. No, I now I remember. You're down in Australia, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So here, movement refers to volition's activity of conditioning. Okay, let's read Venerable Jones' translation of that. The first line indicates the reason, this being that karmic formations arise in dependence on ignorance. So what does that mean? This means that this is implying a syllogism, right? So in a syllogism, you have a subject, a predicate, and a reason. Like say, sound, subject, isn't permanent. That's the predicate because it's what? It's momentary. It's the result of causes and so forth. Sound isn't permanent. Or you can say sound isn't permanent because it's a product, meaning a product of causes and conditions. That's a syllogism. So here, that in this syllogism that's being implied, the reason in that the third element, I would say, yeah, the volitions originate in dependence on ignorance is the reason. The second line, which is that volitions do not exist in ultimate reality, presents the thesis. So they do not exist in reality because what? They are conditioned by ignorance. The third line presents how both the cause and the effect are empty. The fourth line presents the manner in which they are empty. Movement in that statement, quote unquote, here refers to volition's activity. Or let me go back to, we've read that already. So in Venerable Jones' translation, the fourth line indicates the way in which they are empty. That is, movement is strong formation. So when we talk about the 12 links, so you have from ignorance, you have karmic formations. So strong formation, is that what she says here? Movement is strong formation, while the freedom from that is formation's emptiness of formation. Furthermore, free from inherent existence indicates the qualification of the object of negation. This being similar in meaning to not existing in suchness. So, who has thought about this a bit? Paul, have you thought about this a bit? What could you paraphrase that explanation?
I'm not sure.
So this is a quotation from the Lalita Vistara. Karmic formations, I'll use Jones' translation a little bit better. Karmic formations have the condition of ignorance. They are conditioned by ignorance. Those karmic formations do not exist in suchness or in ultimate reality. The two, karmic formations and ignorance, are empty. That is, they are free from inherently existent movement. Or Jimpa says, for they lack intrinsically real movement. Free from inherently existent movement, intrinsically real movement. I'm not sure how Jimpa got real there. Rangshin.
Yeah, established by way of its own character, yeah. Or by way of its own character, I guess, is he's taking that Rangshin Gi.
Right. The real? Where does he get the real from? Rangshin Yoa Dangdewa. Intrinsically, they're free from Rangshin Gini Yoa Dangdewa. I don't see where he gets real there anyway, for they lack intrinsic movement, or as Jones says, they are free from inherently existent movement. Okay. So what this is sort of elucidating or continuing to try to explain is that, like say, if we talk about a seed and its sprout, the seed will come to cease once the sprout is in existence. That's true. But there's some some continuity of the seed that continues into that sprout. It's not the sprout itself, otherwise they would be one, and it's not completely unrelated to the sprout. It's not intrinsically different than the sprout. Otherwise, it would have no relation to that seed that had continued, the continuity of which is there. Making a little bit of sense? Doris.
I'm stuck on the word movement. I don't know how to process that in this context.
Right. So here, where did it say in the commentary was giving a meaning of the word movement? So the fourth line indicates the way in which they are empty. I'm reading Venerable Jones. That is, movement is strong formation. So, or what do we call in Tibetan? This is Shipa, right? Yowani ngompar duchepa. So when we talk about the 12 links, we talk about ngompar duchepa. What is that usually translated as? Mikhail, do you know? Are you familiar with the Tibetan?
Karmic formations or conditioning factors, like actions,
But just how do you translate ngompar duchepa? So ngompar sometimes means abi, like abhidharma, higher or strong or something like that. Ngompar.
Actual,
Go on.
Sorry, actual also, maybe, manifest.
Right, but that's kind of what it's talking about. So when we're talking about ngompar duchepa, that means something is actually done, is actually being done, actually forming. So the movement means when it's talking about movement here, it's talking about like ngompar duchepa. That means that the formation is being strongly done, or as opposed to just sort of like not being done, actually being done, like that. This too is stated, I say, movement here refers to volition's activity of conditioning. Strong condition, strong, what do we say?
Formation, strong formation.
Strong formation. They try to hold the two together, these two translations of that same sentence. Movement here refers to volition's activity of conditioning. Its activity of conditioning. And the lack of this indicates how volition is empty of volition. Or here, the fourth line indicates the way in which they are empty. That is, movement is strong formation, or the activity of conditioning, while the freedom from that is a formation's emptiness of formation. So what's the meaning of the empty, the freedom from that? Where's the word freedom from that in there? Jimba says, this too is stated with the proviso that they lack intrinsically real movement. Oh no, right before that. Movement here refers to the volition's activity of conditioning, and the lack of this refers to volition's activity of and the lack of this indicates how volition is empty of volition. Dedan dewani, that separation from that. What did they translate here? Freedom from that. Or Jimpa said, what did he say? The lack of this, the separation from this indicates how volition is empty of volition. What does that mean? Volition is empty of volition. Snehi, you have an idea or question?
Yeah, I was just thinking, is he saying that, every link is conditioned by the prior link?
Right?
And so nothing is self-established, like that activity of conditioning, is empty because everything has been conditioned by something prior to it and acts as a condition for something subsequently.
Right, right. So here, movement refers to volition's activity of conditioning, and the lack of this indicates how volition is empty of volition. So when we say volition is empty of volition, or karmic formation is empty of karmic formation, what's that talking about? Rachel. Rachel, you're muted. There you go.
It putting together what you were just saying about it being something is actually being formed. Is it sort of like this is talking about how things come together, so that the word formation gives us that idea. The word volition gives us this kind of, in my mind, volition has the connotation of the will to happen, or that's something that's about to happen, that will. So putting those kind of coming together, the will to have it happen, and that forming, is that what we're after?
Well, that's when we use it, when we translate Gompar Duchepa or Duche as formation, karmic formation. Yeah, we're talking about karma being created, right? Because of the condition of ignorance existing in our mind, when the right conditions arise, we can create karma, generally negative karma that keeps us in cyclic existence in the lower realms, right? So that when we talk about, I'm thinking that last statement is talking about what's called rangtong. What does rangtong mean? Does anyone know? Mikhail, what does rangtong mean?
Own emptiness, sorry, in contrast to Shentong.
Right. So Nadine, what were you going to say? I'm sorry, I should have called on you. You were nodding your head. Fraction of it earlier.
I wanted to say the same.
Yeah. So when we say the seed is empty of the seed, or let's say if you say the temple is empty, you don't mean that the temple is empty. I mean, in some cases you might say that in world, say, can I go to the temple? Oh yeah, the temple is empty. There's no one there, right? You're not talking about emptiness in that context. But when you're talking about the emptiness of the temple, you don't mean that the temple is empty of the monks or nuns that are occasionally there. You're talking about the temple is empty of being an inherently existent temple. That's called rangtong. Shentong would mean that example of Shentong would be the temple is empty because it is empty of monastics, or let's say practitioners. That would be Shentong. It's empty of something other than itself. So when it says how volition is empty of empty, or how karmic formation, the two karmic formations and ignorance are empty. That's the third line here in the FPMT translation. The third line presents how cause and effect are empty. The fourth line presents the manner in which they are empty. The fourth line is they are free from inherently existent movement. Movement here refers to volition's activity of conditioning, and the lack of this, the lack of inherently existing conditioning, indicates how volition is empty of volition. That's how I take that to read. Just finishing up there, indicating how what is being negated is qualified. This qualification has the same meaning as the phrase, do not exist in ultimate reality. Okay. So I think Anna wants to say this would be time to take a break. Okay. So let's take a little break. We'll merge. So Sean, you have a question? Yeah.
If you're meditating on emptiness, for example, someone that's in meditative equipoise on emptiness, there would be none of this movement that they're talking about. But as soon as there is movement of any kind, you're going to be outside of equipoise.
We're talking about two different movements here, right? The movement there in equipoise means that the airs are the prana in your central channel and in the side channels has stopped moving. There's not conceptualizing mind. That is to say, it's still conceptual mind, but it's not involved in what's called namtok. How would you translate namtok, Mikhail?
Conceptions, implied, conceptions.
Yeah, Tokpa means conception. So it is a conceptual mind, but yeah, the kind of mind that's busy thinking about things, not stable. So you're free from that namtok at that time, which is brought about by the movement of the winds. So when the mind is stabilized, if you're on meditative equipoise on emptiness, we're not talking about now the clear light and the indestructible drop or anything. You're equipoised on emptiness. There's not the movement of conceptualizing minds, but as soon as the karma to remain in that has decreased, there can be some movement of the mind, and you will, if you've been on a single-pointed meditation, single-pointed meditative equipoise on emptiness, you will arise from that. And so there will be appearance of conventional phenomena again after that.
But so in this passage, though,
this is talking about movement in a different sense.
Well, it's not that much different, is it? Because you said as soon as your karma to stay in that equipoise ends, then you're going to come out of it. But a Buddha would not ever come out of that. So do they not have this movement that they're talking about at all?
They don't have that movement that you were just referring to, conceptualizing minds. They have no conceptual mind at all. So they have no conceptualizing minds. Conceptualizing minds will have to depend on having a conceptual mind, a mind which is not, in direct perception of something that's knowing by means of mental images. So because of that, there can be conceptualizing minds that sort of talking, oh, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that good? He's bad, she's good, or whatever. But here, when we're talking about the movement here, refers to volition's activity of conditioning. So the movement just means that something is in the process of happening there. It's not so much talking about the movement of the conceptualizing of the winds that brings about the conceptualizing minds. Okay, leave it for a little while. Think about it. We'll talk about it again. So let's continue. In Thupten Jinpa's translation now, let me get to the right place here. Yeah, okay. So in fundamental verses on the middle way, that's Sawe Sharab or the Mula Prajna. So the text, the fundamental wisdom by Nagarjuna goes by various titles. Sometimes it's just called Prajna Mula. How would you translate that, Paul? Prajna Mula.
Just the root wisdom, something like that.
Wisdom. And it's different name of it, is sort of another epithet of it is the fundamental verses on the middle way and so forth, or fundamental wisdom. So anyway, in Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, the meaning of this sutra citation is presented as the following. So this is found in, if you have the Fundamental Wisdom, translation of it, you can find it in chapter 18, which is analysis of, I think, persons and phenomena, isn't it? Chapter 18. So in there, the verse, this is the 10th verse of chapter 18 in Fundamental Wisdom. That which originates in dependence on something, if something comes about because of dependence on something else, it is not, on the one hand, identical with that. It is not identical with that, for one thing. If it arises in dependence on something, it's not identical to that. But neither is it different from it. It's not other than it inherently. It is therefore neither eternal nor annihilated. Or as Venerable Jones says, whatever arises in dependence on something is not at all that itself. It's not that. If you have arisen from, say, if A gives rise to B, B is not identical to A, right? It is also not other than that. So B is not, well, in a conventional sense, you say that B, the result, is other than the cause, but it is not intrinsically or not inherently different. That's the point. Because of that, it is therefore neither eternal nor annihilated, or therefore it is not permanent and is not annihilated. Okay, so this verse, let me just redo a little bit here. You can find this in, if you have the translation of the Ocean of Reasoning, which is the Rikpe Gyatso by Lama Tsongkhapa. That's one of his other big texts on emptiness. So this text is a commentary on what? Stephen, do you know the Rikpe Gyatso?
Yeah, it's Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom.
But Majjhimakavatara is a commentary to that also, right?
Yes, yes.
So is this a commentary to Majjhimakavatara?
The Ocean of Reasoning is Tsongkhapa's commentary to Chandrakirti's commentary to Nagarjuna.
Anyway, so Chandrakirti wrote two commentaries on fundamental wisdom, particularly. One is called Majjhimakavatara, that's called the meaning commentary. He also wrote one called Prasanapada, or clearly worded, which some people didn't feel was a legitimate title. It didn't seem so clear to them. That's the word commentary to fundamental wisdom. So it goes through all the verses of fundamental wisdom one by one with its own commentary. So this is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to that, to Prasanapada, whereas Gompa Rabsel is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to Majjhimakavatara's auto commentary, Vasham. Right? Okay, so in this, if you have a chance to look on page 300, if you have this book, let's see, I have bookmark here, yeah. I have to change glasses. So on page 300, let's see here. Let me make sure I've got the right place. Okay, so this is when we talked about these, we haven't come to that yet, have we? To the heap of Jules Sutra. Okay, that's coming later. I'm sorry. I interrupted here the flow of things. Okay, so this verse from Fundamental Wisdom, I had put some commentary to it that doesn't belong here. Okay, so this verse says, whatever arises in dependence on something is not at all that itself. It is also not other than that. Therefore, it is not permanent and not annihilated. Okay, let's leave it there. I'm going to go back to this in a couple minutes or the next class, but this other commentary. So now the next outline, supposedly that covers the outline that we just had earlier, which was what? What was the name of that outline? The merits of refuting arising from other. So this is the good quality. And what is that good quality? Nadine, what's the good quality that arises?
That one will not will not make the mistake of eternalism or nihilism.
Right. Another way of saying it is that you will realize a dependent origination, or that because phenomena are empty of inherent existence, they are dependent arisings and so forth. Okay, so now the next outline is how intrinsic arising, how inherent arising does not exist in any manner. So we already talked about this to some degree, but here this has two outlines: refuting the view that asserts existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristics. Refuting the assertion of establishment by way of its own character, Venerable Jones says. And two, rejecting objections raised against such a refutation, dispelling arguments regarding the refutation. Okay. So outline here is how intrinsic or inherent arising does not exist in any way. There's no such thing as intrinsic or inherent arising. Okay, so the first outline, refuting the view that asserts existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristics. Itself has three parts, three sub-outlines or three sections. One, the consequence that an Arya's meditative equipoise would become the cause for the destruction of things. So this is a very important argument. And so what we're talking about is how inherent arising he doesn't have it here. How intrinsic arising, inherent arising, does not exist in any manner. So that's basically what we're talking about. And first one, refuting the view that asserts existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristics or an inherent nature. Refuting the view that asserts that. So this is the first reasoning here, the consequence that an Arya's meditative equipoise would become the cause for destruction of things, which we're going to talk about right now. Secondly, the consequence that conventional truths would withstand reasoned analysis or the reasoning analysis. And three, the consequence that ultimate arising would not be negated. Okay, so Jimpa's note there, 482 says, these 3 points, which are part of the demonstration of how intrinsic arising does not exist in any manner, are presented in verses 634 to 637. So what are we at right now? We're still on 633, right? So he's saying these 3 points are part of the demonstration of how inherent arising does not exist in any manner, are presented in verses 634 to 637. which is just coming after we finish these sections. Tsongkhapa reads these three as representing Chandrakirti's critique of his fellow Madhyamika, Bhavaviveka. So was Bhavaviveka Madhyamika? Don?
Don't know.
Oh, Stephen, was Bhavaviveka Madhyamika?
Yes, he was.
Okay, that's that you don't get full points on an exam for saying yes. What was he? What kind of Madhyamika was he?
He was Prasangika, is that correct?
Bhavaviveka? Oh, good
Well,
thing.
I get mixed up between him and Buddhapalita.
Yeah, Buddhapalita was Prasangika. Sometimes said the founder of Prasangika. But Buddhapalita. So Bhavaviveka was Svatantrika Madhyamika, right? Okay, so Chandrakirti's critique of fellow Madhyamika Bhavaviveka, Bhavaviveka was the main person that Chandrakirti was debating in retrospect. I mean, they weren't alive at the same time, right? Who came first? Nadine, you have to think, yeah. Bhavaviveka or
Buddhapalita, because his view was more profound, and Bhavaviveka was arguing with this view, and Chandrakirti then said Buddhapalita had the right view.
right. So Buddhapalita was a disciple of Nagarjuna and wrote his commentary, sometimes just called Buddhapalita. What do we call that in modern literature when something's named after itself? There's some term I see in the news all the time. Bespoke, maybe. Yeah. Anyway.
Eponymous.
What is it?
Eponymous.
Eponymous. There we go. Yeah. So Buddhapalita wrote this text. It was a word commentary of Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom. Bhavaviveka saw faults in it from his point of view. This we have talked about many times in the past, to paraphrase some of the verses from today. And you can read about that, you review in your mind about that. So that was at that juncture when Bhavaviveka wrote his critique of Buddhapalita's interpretation of Nagarjuna. He was more or less setting out his idea of a different system than what would be called Prasangika. His view was more what would be called Svatantrika Madhyamika. So they're both fellow Madhyamikas, but they're still within that. There are these two sections. So Tsongkhapa reads these as representing Chandrakirti's critique of fellow Madhyamika Bhavaviveka, who, while denying ultimate arising, he said there was no ultimate arising or no true arising. He subscribed to some notion of arising by virtue of intrinsic characteristics. So he said that conventionally phenomena were inherently existent. In his Essence of True Eloquence, this is another text by Lama Tsongkhapa talking about the definitive and interpretable sutras, among other things. In his Essence of True Eloquence, Tsongkhapa speaks of three arguments presented in the root text. So we're getting these three. What are these three points here? Three arguments. That an Arya's meditative equipoise could be the cause for the destruction of things. Conventional truths would withstand ultimate analysis, reasoning analysis, and ultimate arising would not be negated. Those are the three that are talked about here, these 3 points. So Tsongkhapa, in his Essence of True Eloquence, Tsongkhapa speaks of three arguments presented in the root text, these three, with one additional argument found in the commentary. That means in whose commentary? Chandrakirti's commentary, I think, Bhashyam, for a presentation of Tsongkhapa's reading of the 4 relevant stanzas. So that would mean that are talking about the 3 reasonings that are presented here in brief and then elaborated on in 34 to 37, the next verses, plus the extra one. So there are going to be 4 reasonings. For a presentation of Tsongkhapa's reading of the 4 relevant stanzas of entering into the middle way, as developed in Lama Tsongkhapa's Lekshe Ningpo, Essence of Eloquence, see Thurman's Central Philosophy, 366 to 375. So in our discussion group, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but let's just continue on here first. The first, what did we say? Refuting the view that asserts existence by virtue of intrinsic characteristics. The first one, the consequence that an Arya's meditative equipoise would become the cause for the destruction of things. This says, this is the next verse. This is 634, right? If the intrinsic characteristics of things were to arise dependently, so if inherently existent things were to arise dependently, things would come to be destroyed by denying it. Is that right? Emptiness would then be a cause for the destruction of things. But because this is illogical, no real entities exist. Okay, how do we unpack that before we go into the commentary? So when Lama Tsongkhapa wrote commentaries to verses of the Basham, he would write 2 commentaries, one to the immediate commentary to the root verse, and then one commenting on Chandrakirti's commentary in the Basham. So Chandrakirti wrote both, right? He wrote the root verse and his commentary to that. So Lama Tsongkhapa would also comment on the root verse and on the Basham. So here, if the intrinsic characteristics of things were to arise dependently, or as Venerable Jones said, if own character were dependent. Gelte rangit seni tenurna. It just means dependent. I think Venerable Jones is more precise there. If own character were dependent. Chimpa says, if intrinsic characteristic, that means own characteristic, of things were to arise dependently, if they were to be dependent. How could that be? If it's something is intrinsically, if the intrinsic characteristic of things were to arise dependently, if that were true, things would come to be destroyed by denying it. What does that mean? Don, come on. When you shake your head, then just I have to call on you.
Sounds like an oxymoron to me.
Is it? If own character were dependent, by deprecating it, things would be destroyed. Okay, seems like an oxymoron. Okay. I'll read Jones after that. If emptiness were to become a cause for the destruction of things, that would not be suitable. Therefore, things do not exist. When you say do not exist, that means that they do not exist inherently, right? Okay, let's to unpack that, let's read what Lama Tsongkhapa wrote, quoting Chandrakirti. So first of all, he says, Chandrakirti states, so this is in Chandrakirti's, I think, in his Basham, right? This has note 483. Let's check that. Commentary, yeah. So this is from the Basham, because Chandrakirti wrote other texts. Lama Tsongkhapa says, Chandrakirti states, one must accept without doubt. Where are we? Where did I get this? Oh, I see. So in Venerable Jones, on the bottom of 143, it says, the statement, there is no production of any phenomena inherently whatsoever, must be accepted inevitably. Jimpa says here, without doubt, right? One must accept without doubt the statement, there is no intrinsic arising, there is no inherent arising with respect to any phenomenon. Is that right? Can you say phenomenon, or do you have to say with respect to any phenomena? Okay, I don't know. Diane is still there. One must accept without doubt the statement, there is no intrinsic arising with respect to any one phenomena or any phenomena, any phenomenon, or to, to any phenomena. One has to accept that without doubt. So logically, this is a point we must definitely accept. Lama Tsongkhapa says, we should not assert the contrary, saying, naughtily, it is not appropriate in this tradition of Chandrakirti to posit a standpoint. Oh boy. Now we're getting into another interesting topic. Chandrakirti states, one must accept without doubt, how could we say, unequivocally. Am I pronouncing that right? One must accept unequivocally the statement, there is no intrinsic arising with respect to any phenomenon. Do you agree? Is there, with respect to any phenomena, is there any kind of inherent arising? No, you have to all say, you have to all unmute at the same time, say, no, there's no inherent production from anything at any time, at anywhere. So logically, this is a point we must definitely accept. We should not assert the contrary. Go on.
Is it referring to these Madhyamikas from the past who were saying that the Madhyamikas have no thesis, no position?
In the end, yeah, that's going to come at the very last part of this sentence, yeah. But here it's saying, so logically, at this point, we must definitely accept. We have to accept that phenomena do not come about. They're not produced. They do not arise from something which is inherently existent. Okay, whether it's inherently the same.
So this.
Go on.
Sorry, this is also explaining the first line of the verse, right? So it's the first was a little bit cryptic.
Right,
the
right.
intrinsic characteristic of things were to arise dependently. So that's meaning if there were intrinsic arising, dependent arising, right?
Right. Here it's in Tibetan, it says, Gelte rangi seni tengyurna. So that would mean if the, let's say, inherent existence, rangi seni, were to be dependent, by deprecating it, things would be destroyed. That's Venerable Jones. Or things would come to be destroyed by denying it or deprecating it. Emptiness would then be a cause for the destruction of things. But this is illogical, so no real entities exist. So what are we talking about here? When an Arya being meditates on ultimate reality, searching for the inherently existent phenomena, finding nothing, there is no inherently existent phenomena. When the mind is experiencing that non-affirming negation, the lack of inherent existence of a particular phenomena or all phenomena, at that point, you are seeing ultimate reality. You are seeing truth, right? Remember when we talked about the two meanings, the meaning of truth? Something is true if its mode of existing is compatible with its mode of appearing. The way that it actually subsides or exists is in accord with the way that it appears to you. The classic example is the American car salesman, big smile and appearing very friendly, but his reality is just thinking about his own profit. You can think about that also with some of the politicians today, or your neighbor who is smiling at you all the time, but every night is moving the fence further and further onto your property. So his property looks like it's getting bigger and yours is getting smaller. So his mode of appearance, with a big smile and patting you on the back and talking friendly, does not accord with his mode of existence. So so are conventional truths, Snehi?
They are true for an ordinary person.
They're truth for a concealing mind. Yeah. Are they truth? Are they true?
Conventionally, they're true.
Yeah, no. So yeah, you could say conventional, but the main thing is they are not true, because the only thing that is true, because their mode of appearing, conventional things, their mode of appearing does not accord with the way that they actually exist. They appear to be inherently existent, but they are actually empty of inherent existence. So they are not true. The only thing that is true is emptiness, because its mode of appearance accords with its mode of existence, right? The way that it's appearing is to be empty of inherent existence, and the way that it exists is that it is empty of inherent existence. Okay, so
Venerable George,
yeah.
can I ask a question? You know, that very first line, if the intrinsic characteristics of things were to arise dependently, is this addressing the Abhidharma proponents, who say that there are real dharmas and they exist independent from causes and conditions? Is that where this is going?
It can be, or as Venerable Jones says, his own character were dependent. By deprecating it or denying it, things would be destroyed. Okay, not exactly clear that that's talking about the Vaibhashikas and so forth. Let's just see. Let's read, having talked about just the words there a little bit, let's read what Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to that is. So we read the first part there. Chandrakirti states that one must accept without doubt, unequivocally, if I finally pronounce it correctly, unequivocally, the statement, there is no intrinsic arising with respect to any phenomenon. So logically, this is a point we must definitely accept. We should not assert the contrary, saying it is not appropriate in this tradition of Chandrakirti to posit a standpoint. Okay, so this is talking about something different than the explicitly mentioned in the root verse there that we just talked about. This is just sort of elaborating on his point. So we should not assert the contrary. What are we asserting? We do assert that no phenomena arises inherently. There's no inherent production. There's no inherent arising, right? That's Nagarjuna's first stanza. We should not assert the contrary or something contrary to that, saying it's not right for the tradition of Chandrakirti. It's not appropriate in this tradition of Chandrakirti to posit a standpoint. So what's that talking about? Paul, you've studied in this in detail. How would you put that in a nutshell? What is that talking about?
Well, in general, it's talking about whether assertions are inherently existent, whether, that if you have an inherently existent position or a position on inherent that has something to do with inherent existence.
Yeah, basically talking about whether Prasangika can make statements. So some people said that the Prasangika only refutes things. It doesn't have any standpoints. But that's completely wrong. Prasangika says phenomena are dependent arisings, due to the condition of ignorance, there is karmic formation. There's many, many statements that Prasangika present, but also always from the position of non-inherent existence. So people are, without thinking of that, some Madhyamikas would say, or so-called Madhyamikas would say, that the Prasangika doesn't have any positions. In fact, even some quotation, what is it, Paul or Mikhail, or those of you who know these quotations, something in Nagarjuna, if I had a position, what?
If I had any position, I would be at fault. Because I'm not at fault, I have no positions. I think it's Vigraha Vyavartini, verse 29, refutation of objections, verse 29.
There we go. Oh boy. Now we have a new, the verse 29
See,
of,
that's what happens when I wake up and have my tea, Venerable George.
verse 29 of Ratnavali or Ratnavali, did you say?
Vigraha Vyavartini, refutation of objections.
Refutation of objections, which was by Nagarjuna also, one of his famous texts. So that can be misinterpreted by people as saying Prasangika doesn't have any position, any standpoint, same meaning, standpoint, position. How did Venerable Jones say this? We should not assert the contrary, saying it is not appropriate. It is inappropriate in this tradition of Chandrakirti to posit assertions. Okay, so you shouldn't fall into that misguided understanding, because all of the positions or standpoints that Prasangika does have, and that Nagarjuna did have, all of them are qualified by the lack of inherent existence. There's, you can make statements like that. Okay, so continuing. Now, in contrast, what does that mean? On the other hand, or as Jones says, if this were not the case, in contrast, on the other hand, if the intrinsic characteristic of a thing, such as a form or feelings and so forth, were to arise in dependence upon causes and conditions through its own essence, this would imply that a yogi, directly perceiving the emptiness of intrinsic existence of all phenomena, would realize emptiness by denying such a nature of things. Okay, a bit to unpack there. It makes sense, first of all, first reading? Doris is, I'm not sure that mudra is like, yeah, okay. Louise? Not yet. Crystal clear, Nadine? No? Rachel? Making sense? Okay, not completely. Okay, so now in contrast, so what does that mean? We accept the first part of the paragraph above said one had to accept without doubt, unequivocally, the statement there is no intrinsic arising with respect to any phenomena. That we would all accept that, right? If on the other hand, if the intrinsic characteristic of a thing, so that would mean the inherent nature of a thing, such as form or feelings, were to arise in dependence on causes and conditions, through its own essence, this would imply that a yogi, directly perceiving the emptiness of intrinsic existence of all phenomena, would realize emptiness by denying such a nature of things. So they would destroy things. What does that mean? What does that mean?
I'll take a shot at it.
Say again?
I think it means that if we were to say conventional reality is the ultimate reality, then a yogi that goes into meditative equipoise on emptiness would destroy that reality because it would no longer be there.
Yeah, so a couple of things are important here. So the perception, meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness is realizing truth, right? Supposedly that's the way things are, right? Emptiness exists the way that it appears. So if to that appearance there are no inherently existing phenomena, that would mean what?
Nihilism?
No, no. Is it just a step back. You're meditating on emptiness. You're realizing truth. You're not appearing any kind of ordinary phenomena, inherently existent phenomena. They're not appearing to you. What does that apply? What does that imply about inherently existing phenomena? So-called inherently existing phenomena. That they're not true. Because you're perceiving truth, right? You're perceiving emptiness, but you're not perceiving inherently existing things. So that implies, because you're perceiving truth and you're not perceiving these other things, they are not truths, right? Or you could say they are not true. Does that make sense? Okay, so now in contrast, if the intrinsic characteristic of a thing, such as forms or feelings, were to arise in dependence on causes and conditions, I think this is getting back to either Snehi or Rachel, I can't remember who asked the question, was this like the lower school's idea of inherently existent phenomena, truly existent phenomena, giving rise to other things? I think it's touching on that. If the intrinsic characteristic of a thing, such as a form or feeling, were to arise in dependence on causes and conditions through its own essence, or as Venerable Jones says, if that were not the case, that is, if a nature that is establishment by way of its own character, that is by way of its own, that is, in other words, by way of its own entity, if that such a nature of forms and feelings and so forth were produced in dependence on causes and conditions, when a yogi or yogini, or you could use yogi to include both male and female, when a yogi directly realizes phenomena as empty of inherent existence, he or she would realize emptiness by means of deprecating that or denying that, right? When you realize emptiness, you are denying inherently existing phenomena, right? Now, in contrast, Jimpa says, if the intrinsic characteristic of a thing, such as form or feeling, were to arise in dependence upon causes and conditions through its own, or in other words, through its own essence, this would imply that a yogi, directly perceiving emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena, would realize emptiness by denying such a nature of things. You would be denying this inherent nature. Then he continues, meditative equipoise does not actually perceive forms and so on, right? Does not actually. This is because one meditative equipoise necessarily does not observe forms and so forth. It necessarily does not observe forms and so forth. I think that's more correct. Chimpa says meditative equipoise does not actually perceive forms and so forth. Actually, that would mean you could have some kind of fake perception of meditative equipoise on emptiness. I think Jones is more correct here. Meditative equipoise necessarily does not observe forms and so forth. Right? Remember that when we talked about meditative equipoise on emptiness. What's the famous saying, Nadine, about seeing?
The supreme seeing is not seeing.
Not seeing. So the supreme seeing of emptiness means not seeing any conventional phenomena. That's, there are many kinds of elaborations of that. So meditative equipoise does not perceive form and so forth in any way, but if they were to exist through their intrinsic characteristic, then meditative equipoise would necessarily perceive them. Say, if they were to exist, if they were true through their intrinsic characteristic, that is, if they were inherently true, then meditative equipoise would necessarily perceive them. The meditative equipoise on emptiness is seeing truth. It would see these phenomena if they were true, but they're not, right? And the next little 3 words there, it does not. The meditative equipoise does not perceive them in any way. And if this were so, or you could say, since this is so, these things would then become non-existent. From one point of view, you say that they are inherently existent, they've inherently arisen, and they are true. And so they should appear to the Arya's meditative equipoise on emptiness. If they're true, they must appear to that, but they don't, right? They don't. So as he says, it does not. That is it, meaning if they were to exist through intrinsic characteristics, then meditative equipoise would necessarily perceive them. It does not. It does not perceive them. It does not perceive these intrinsically existent phenomena. Following? Now the root verse is getting a little more clear, right? What the commentary is. And if this were so, these things that you could say were previously existing, they were inherently existing, these things would then become non-existent because the meditative equipoise on emptiness, which is perceiving truth, does not perceive them, so they are not truths, right? If they do become non-existent, if they became non-existent because of the Arya meditators' equipoise on emptiness, it would then be the case that what was existent prior to the meditative equipoise would subsequently come to be destroyed or ceased. Sean is getting the rhythm there. You see his head bobbing. Okay, yeah, it's making some sense. The meditative equipoise would become the cause of their destruction. So just as hammers and so forth are causes for the destruction of vases or vases and so forth, the classic example from the tenets talking about what is an ultimate truth in Vaibhashika and everything, something that can withstand being analyzed or pounded on by a hammer. That's not for Vaibhashika. The vase that can be broken by the hammer is not an ultimate truth, right? Its parts are more ultimate truths. So if this were so, these things would then become non-existent. If they do become non-existent, this would then be the case that what was existent prior to the meditative equipoise would subsequently come to be destroyed or ceased. The meditative equipoise would become the cause for the destruction. So just as hammers and the like are causes for the destruction of vases and the like, seeing emptiness too would then be a cause for the destruction of the nature of things, thus denigrating these conventional things, saying that they aren't really true, right? But this is illogical. So no real entities exist. That is, in other words, by virtue of their intrinsic characteristics. and we must never uphold such a notion of intrinsic arising. Okay, so if we go back and read that verse again, let's see, having heard the commentary, if intrinsic characteristics of things were to arise dependently, things would come to be destroyed by denying it. Things means conventional things, inherently existent things, would come to be destroyed by denying it. Denying what? Denying their arisal, right? Emptiness would then be the cause for the destruction of things. But this is illogical. So the original premise that if real entities arose from one another, that's been refuted. So no real entities exist, because the meditative equipoise of Aryas does not destroy things, right? So you wouldn't want to have the Dalai Lama or one of the high lamas who has realization of emptiness coming to your record in your meditation room next to your record collection or your CD collection and meditating, because all those things, conventional things, would be destroyed, right? Because in their meditative equipoise, they didn't exist. It's not like that. So phenomena do not exist inherently. You have to say that, okay? Are we okay? Continue. So what is that? Jimpa's translation. And if this were so, these things would then become non-existent. If they do become non-existent, this would be the case that what was existent prior to the meditative equipoise would subsequently come to be destroyed or ceased. The meditative equipoise would become the cause for their destruction. So just as hammers and the like are causes for the destruction of vases and the like, seeing emptiness too would then be a cause for the destruction of the nature of things, thus denigrating them, denigrating conventional things. But this is illogical, so no real entities exist, right? Conventional phenomena exist. What are we? This would be a cause for denigrating what? Or denying what? If emptiness too would then be a cause for the destruction of the nature of things. So this supposed imagined inherent nature of things. But this is illogical, so no real entities exist. That is to say, by virtue of their intrinsic characteristics, and we must never uphold such a notion of intrinsic arising. Okay, so then, now those Madhyamikas who accept arising by virtue of intrinsic characteristics, which Madhyamikas are those, Stephen?
Those would be the Svatantrikas who accept inherent existence on the conventional level.
Right. So Bhava Viveka and so forth, maybe. So those Madhyamikas who accept arising by virtue of intrinsic characteristics do maintain that even though things exist through their intrinsic characteristics, even though things are inherently existing, and you can find something there if you search within the basis of imputation, even though things exist through their intrinsic characteristics, this does not constitute an admission of true existence. So this, we've touched on this before, but it's good to hear it said explicitly from the Lama Tsongkhapa's, Chandrakirti and Lama Tsongkhapa and other Prasangikas after Chandrakirti. There was no school of Svatantrika until essentially Chandrakirti wrote his critique of Bhava Viveka, right? Bhava Viveka or Buddhapalita? Bhava Viveka, right? Bhava Viveka criticized Buddhapalita. Chandrakirti criticized Bhava Viveka, and implying that his system that he was imagining was like a Svatantrika system, like something where phenomena had some kind of existence, even reasoning had existence, an inherent existence. So now those Madhyamikas who accept arising by virtue of inherent existence, by virtue in intrinsic characteristics, they do maintain that even though things exist through their intrinsic characteristics, this does not constitute an admission of true existence. They are saying just because they are inherently existent, that doesn't mean they're truly existent. Because in the meditative equipoise on emptiness, they don't appear. So they're not true. They're not truly existent, but they're still, come on, they still could be inherently existent. That's the Svatantrika position, right? Following, remembering? Okay. They assert that if phenomena such as forms exist through their intrinsic characteristics, if forms and so forth were inherently existent, this does not necessarily entail that they are perceived within the direct vision of suchness. So they're saying there's a difference between being inherently existent and truly existent. These phenomena are not truly existent, but they are inherently existent. And this does not necessarily entail that they are perceived within the direct vision of suchness. So it doesn't, just because they're inherently existent doesn't mean they will be perceived with the direct realization of emptiness, where none of these things appear. So they don't see any contradiction. Making sense? What do you think, Stephen? You have the one thinking doubtful mood.
Yeah, I'm still processing that last sentence of Venerable George.
Yeah. So sometimes it's good to look at Chimpa's notes there. 484 says, Tsongkhapa is referring in particular to Bhavaviveka, who Tsongkhapa credits with rejecting true existence. When he says credits, I'm not sure, discredits, you might say, discredits with rejecting true existence, but retaining some notion of intrinsic existence, at least on the conventional level. That's what also Chandrakirti was critiquing Bhavaviveka about, right? Didn't start with Lama Tsongkhapa. So let's see, let's go back there. So then it says, they may claim such things, so the Svatantrikas may claim such things, but that this degree of objectivity does not in fact constitute true existence has already been explained above.
Does. I think it's
Yeah,
it's does in fact. I think you added the negation.
Oh, what did I say? Does not. Sorry, thank you for correcting me. Like I said, like in the bi-monthly confession, or sometimes the Lama who's reciting, or the monk or nun who's reciting the Pratimoksha Sutra will forget some word or put a negative where it shouldn't be. So hopefully the sharp students, they will correct. Thank you. So they may claim such things, but this degree of objectivity, making things concrete as being inherently existent on the conventional level, this does not in fact constitute, they may claim this, but this degree of objectivity does in fact, again I said does not, does in fact constitute true existence as has been explained above. From the Prasangika point of view, inherent existence, if something were inherently existent, it would constitute being truly existent. So here he has another note, see page 185, and for the latter discussion, he refers to page 267 before. So, oh, I didn't put that here. Okay, so I didn't put that note here. So here, page 185. So can someone look on the written text, page 185, And what's the name of that section right above there? Anyone see? Page 190.
Grasping at true
Grasping at-
existence.
Say again?
Please, Rachel.
Grasping at true existence, the contrary apprehension.
Grasping at true existence.
The contrary apprehension.
Okay. I'm not sure that
Okay.
existent, grasping it. I'm just trying to search my it doesn't allow, when you said contrary apprehension, that came in there. Anyway, I can't find that. I'm trying to find where it is in the in my own e-text.
It's
Yeah, at any rate, you won't be able to tell me the page number. So on Monday, oh, we're way over time. And on Monday in discussion group, we'll talk about some of these things. We'll talk about this also and what is stated on page 185 and further on in the text. We'll get into that. Sorry I went over so radically here. Thank you for your energy and your perseverance. I admire very much. Yesterday was called the Day of Miracles, right? And karmic, karma was multiplied, like mind-blowing degree, but also still now karma is multiplied. So if you are doing any virtuous activities, it's good to do them before the end of the month. Yesterday also was an eclipse of the moon, and apparently Doris mentioned to me that one of the moon landers that still has a camera took a picture. So when there's an eclipse of the moon, that means the Earth has come between the sun and the moon, right? That was what was happening. But from the moon, you see a solar eclipse. The Earth is eclipsing the moon. So that was the first photo that was taken simultaneous to the lunar, the lunar one yesterday. So any questions before we end? What are you doing? Doris.
I'm having trouble with one of the sentences.
Right.
One that says, they assert that if phenomena, that sentence, I'm struggling with the word if in that sentence.
This is in the section about the Arya's meditative equipoise destroying things.
It's a sentence just before note 484.
Oh, okay. I can find it that way. Just before 484. Where is 484? Right there. So they assert that if phenomena such as forms exist through their intrinsic characteristic, this does not necessarily entail that they are perceived within the direct vision of suchness. So you find some difficulty with the if.
Right. Like I want to say they do assert that, but this does not necessarily entail, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So let me just see in Venerable Jones' translation here. Where is that? That's just before that commentary. So likewise, if seeing emptiness were also to become a cause for the destruction of the nature of things and for its deprecation, that would not be suitable. Okay, that's before that. Therefore, things established by way of their own character do not exist. One should never exert inherent. Okay. It is in fact said in regard to this, those Madhyamikas who assert production established by its own character assert that, although established by way of its own character, it is not truly existent. For this reason, even if forms and so forth are established by way of their own character, they are not necessarily observed by a direct seer of suchness. I think that's the sentence you're talking about, right? That last one. For this reason, even if forms and so forth are established by way of their own character, they are not necessarily observed by a direct seer of suchness. That's
It's that sentence.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
general text.
Right. So I think you're right. The Svatantrikas, they assert that phenomena such as forms and so forth exist through their intrinsic characteristic on the conventional level. Maybe that's why he puts the if in there. In the case of their existing on the conventional level, they don't necessarily have to exist on the ultimate level. So they don't necessarily have to appear to a meditative equipoise meditating directly on emptiness.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, a little bit tough. So where did we end right there? They may claim such things, but that this degree of objectivity does not in fact constitute true existence has already been explained above. So that's what we can talk about on Monday, these where this was explained before. And we you know that already, that it was critiqued by Chandrakirti and all of the present geekas after that. If things were to be inherently existent, they would necessarily be truly existent. But that's not accepted by the Svatantrikas. Then Lama Tsongkhapa says, I will elaborate on this point further below as well. So the opponent cannot avoid the flaws revealed in this argument above. Okay, that's where we'll start next time with a quotation from the Ratnakutta Sutra, which Jimpa incorrectly attributes to the Upali Paripricha. It's actually the Kashapya Paripricha. But anyway, we'll talk about that next time, because it's quoting Kashapya. Kashapya doesn't show up in the questions of Upali. He's absent. He's somewhere else. He's not mentioned. Okay, so let's dedicate virtues are in the form of merits and collection of wisdom. So there's two kinds of virtues. Due to these virtues that we've created today in class, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that same state. Dei Sala. So Sa means, as you know, like Bhumi, into that same Bhumi, into that same state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. If you were at the teaching of the Dalai Lama last night via YouTube, not there physically in Bodh Gaya, you would have heard that mentioned when the bodhicitta vows were given. That was a famous verse. That was the prayer that was mentioned. Then peerless teacher and assembly of children of the conquerors, that means the bodhisattvas, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, so all of the great beings, victorious Losang, Drakpa, means Lama Tsongkhapa, who was the spiritual father to his disciples, his two main disciples and his other disciples who were like his heirs, his sons, together with your lineage, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice. So there's two ways to spread the teachings: by giving physical, verbal teachings and so forth. What did it say? In upholding and spreading the teachings through explanation and practice. Explanation meaning speech. Practice would mean actually, doing the various kinds of practices. You Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience. that is never discouraged, incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for the welfare of mother migrating beings, mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. And at your passing, I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the Triple Gem and the great waves of bodhicitta of the Bodhisattvas, the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of the new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us disciples, fortunate disciples. Who knows? Maybe quickly. And then finally, all of our teachers who have explained the Dharma to us, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, compassion, and love, illuminating spiritual friends, please, I make this request, please, implied here, please live a long and stable life. Okay, so as things are getting more and more crazy in the world, just everywhere you look, this is the time to remember the words of the sort of the advice of the Kadampa Geshe, that this is not the time to give, to become a famous propounder, start new systems and things, to try to change others. This is the time to control your own mind, to subdue your own mind. So while all these things are coming out, use it as an opportunity to meditate on Lojong and the various ways of understanding how to develop the two bodhicittas, conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. That should be our goals all the time, alternating, like a sword that might have two sharp edges at the beginning. When your meditation on bodhicitta becomes dull, doesn't give any progress, turn the sword around and start meditating on all the verses having to do with emptiness, all the implications of emptiness. And when emptiness doesn't do it for you, turn the sword around and use compassion, the conventional truths, karma, and so forth. So all the time you'll have some way of, analyzing. So always think of that, the conventional and ultimate bodhicittas. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing some of you on Monday, if you can come. If not, next Saturday. Still have another week of this very special until the new moon. We just had full moon yesterday, so karma is multiplied. So try to do your virtuous activities as well as you can. Take care. See you next week.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.